The journey to Canada was an adventure that I just jumped into. I had no idea what I was going to, what to expect. And the opening plenary at Banff was beautiful, but I did spend 2 days in Calgary with a very good friend of mine. It was like a day and a night for me to adjust, and then I went back to the airport to connect back with the organizers. But it was beautiful just to be there in Alberta and see Calgary and just, catch a train, catch a bus, catch another train, move from the airport, move back, and just see how life flows in Canada, which is very different from where I'm from in Malawi. And those first 3 days at Banff, the beauty of Banff was staggering. There were trees, there were mountains, there was snow on the mountains. And I did get to get a gondola ride up to the topmost points. You can't deny the beauty, the culture, the diversity, the languages that are in Canada. The second part of the journey, the first part was arriving, settling in, getting used to the time. The second part of the journey for me was the opening plenary and meeting the speakers. From the very beginning, Dr. Sharma and his open source DPI about how you could get everybody connected. You could beat KYC. You could get people from different languages through AI, being able to use technology, receive financial transactions. It was inclusive and engaged leadership. You could see how passionate he was about what he was doing. Um, Another speaker that stood out for me was Dindi Oponko and the many initiatives that she has going on in Africa. To see a young woman, beautiful young woman, that has done so much on the African entrepreneurship landscape was mind-blowing. I just stood there and I could think, Karen in the future, but from the Malawi perspective. And I was able to get a book from her that I've been reading about how to set up a food entrepreneurship initiative. How do you set up your management systems? What sort of board are you looking at? How do you improve your product? How do you build up for success from the very beginning? You could tell she was about individual excellence, product excellence, perfect execution, systems in place. I was looking at an African that was organized, and from where I was sitting, that was a bit of a miracle to realize that there are people out there that have actually done it. And I could learn from role models and examples that I wasn't moving in chaos. I wasn't stumbling in the dark. Um, there were people out there that could guide me. And I thought, it's true. It doesn't matter who gets the credit. What matters is who gets the work done. For there is a lot of work to be done in Africa. Um, no pun or hidden messages intended. There's just a lot of work on the ground. So there were other speakers and I did interact a lot, asked a lot of questions about the need for labor in Canada and how there was a direct opposite need in Africa for jobs. That back home there were like 80,000 people, young people that needed jobs, and there was in Canada they were looking for like 250,000 people to fill in various jobs of different levels and different skills. So what came out of that was the possibility of a bilateral agreement that could allow young people to move from Malawi to Canada in such a way that there was not so much brain drain on the country, that there could be mutual exchange and it could actually boost our education system since we're trying to cater at a global level. So that conversation has been ongoing and something that came out of that conference at the opening plenary. Yes, there was great food at the Kinner Center. And yes, I met great people right away at breakfast at the very first day. And everybody was expecting to learn, expecting to connect. And when I met my study group, there was also the group charter, and from the very onset, it was very clear in our group that there would be clashes and there would be differences of opinion, but we were ready to charter, to write it down, that we're going to work together. And I was very happy to meet our chairperson, Amy Fleming, that has taken us across Canada with great and fearless leadership. So meeting other leaders, getting to see how they navigate through problems, how they think through situations, and the humility of being able to be with people from different social statuses to dorm at SFU and University of Victoria. It's amazing. So meeting the study group was amazing, and I got to meet like 17 other individuals from 11 different countries. There were a lot of different personalities from different industries, creativity, creative industries, healthcare, cars, more marine industries, some industries that I don't interact with or haven't interacted with in my local network. I got to see a lot of marine industry. While in Canada, I got to get on the ferry. I got to see how there's a lot of logistics and shipping and how goods are moved from the ship to the train to the truck and what's involved around that. That was very new for me. So amongst yourselves was a lot of learning that could be shared, and they would ask questions that I hadn't thought of and have comments that I was still thinking about. So it was like moving at the speed of 17, and that was amazing. I believe the study groups were a great way to bring out learning and to bring out the right questions with the situations and the places we're going to meet. So we'd get to know each other, go to dinner, and then they would pack us in a bus and get us started on a tour across British Columbia, which is naturally very beautiful. I had never seen so many trees in my life. They spread out like an ocean. And then there were so many beautiful picturesque moments. It reached a point I stopped taking pictures and just allowed other people to take pictures. So at this point, on the study tours, the very first thing that jumped up to us was meeting the First Nations. But it also made me realize that there were unique stories of struggle and oppression and of just coming forth out there. Meeting Chief Sophie and just hearing her struggle and just hearing how she was able with the community to change St. Eugene Mission from a place of a horror story basically to a place where they could share the triumphs of their journey, of them coming to a place where they accepted what had happened to them. They were confronting it and they were turning it basically back home, what we call into a testimony, into a story of how they've overcome those differences and how they're still moving on to a better place. And while the bitterness and the hate and the pain of the oppression and the hurt that the First Nations have gone through cannot be gotten over overnight, and perhaps others may never be over it. I just love the story of how we met different chiefs. There was a young leader in Vancouver who said, regardless of what people's emotions are, what was possible was making clear, tangible changes in people's status of life, was still bringing them to economic freedom, to where they could own homes, get jobs, have good health care, that even though in their hearts the journey might take longer, they could still be helped by seeing the world around them change, to First Nations having their own neighborhoods, being able to go to college, have a great education, have a life that they could enjoy. And that tangibility of change was something that I picked up as a leadership lesson. It wasn't just the First Nations that we met and that we learned from about leadership of the people that are coming out of oppression and learning through to navigate the different emotions, the different places of perspective into a tangible framework of change, into having proper policies in place, into having conversations and agreements. But we also met Chinese Canadians, Japanese Canadians, African Canadians, all these groups of people that we did not know were there. We met German immigrants, Russian immigrants. It was such a diversity. And what we noticed was every community leveraging together to create spaces for themselves to express what they're doing, to work better with the people that they're with. There was a lot of inclusivity, there was a lot of acknowledgement, there was a lot of culture. And I noticed that there were deliberate spaces set up to remember those that had contributed to these communities being there in the first place. We went to Hogan's Valley, we went to a Japanese memorial, and there we learned phrases like Shikata Ganai, life goes on, and just lessons we've learned from the people that have come through victorious in a new place and are making a story and a life for themselves in Canada. Learned that Canada was warm, was accommodating, and though it did have struggles, its people were tenacious and quite heroic, really, if you could look at some of the atrocities that had gone on between peoples. To think that people can think of reconciliation and moving on just shows you the strength of the human spirit and the need for strong and clear vision leadership. Canada wasn't without its challenges. We did see again and again the challenge of having an aging population, especially in the towns that were far away from the cities, and that it was difficult to keep local causes going like mountaineering, housing, and healthcare when there wasn't a youthful community to take it forward when they had all moved to the big cities to look for jobs or opportunities. You could see the diminishing energy of an aging population. And there was a clear need that there is a need for labor, for care, and for other people to be involved with the struggle that is happening in the smaller towns. And there was also an apparent unhappiness of the representation at bigger provincial political spaces. Whilst when we did go higher up, meeting politicians, you could see that those at the province level, at city level, felt that they had clear, they could be heard and their voices were represented in that they were fighting their battles like Grace Lore, being mothers in politics, being able to bring a different image, to be approachable, relatable, always learning and always moving forward. But you could tell that as much as there was a society that was moving forward and thinking forward, there was still a need for the smaller towns to be represented on the provincial level, at the legislative assembly, to feel like their the voices were being heard. So we did learn the need that a leader needs to hear the voices of different factions of society, and the leader is someone that leaves no faction of society behind, that they are sure that the development that is there is equitable as well as that it's diverse and it's inclusive. The tenacity that we saw in the small towns had to do with post-COVID and during COVID era, that most people found themselves wanting to live in wider open spaces to reconnect with nature. And there were a lot of wildlife centers and tourism and programs and activities happening in small towns that allowed people to connect back to their roots, connect back to nature in a less intrusive and a fun way. We went to several wildlife parks, we went to the Butart Gardens, and so many beautiful places where people could connect back with nature, have an adventure there, and yes, it was beautiful. We had fun. I had fun in Canada. I got lost, drenched in the rain, got some sickness. When you're trying to walk while looking out the window on a ferry, it's not recommended. Just look forward. And I still feel that from all the experiences that we had on the study tour, the open plenary, and as we were putting together our lessons at the closing, that I'm still making my way back home. And there are many lessons and many directions that I'm still processing, but I did take away a life lesson. First of all, the popular phrase was, hope is not a plan. You can't just hope that the future will be great. You just can't hope that everything will fall into place. You have to take deliberate action to plan the future that you want to see. You can start by becoming the change that you want to see in the world, like Mahatma Gandhi, like Jesus Christ, and all those wonderful leaders and what they say about always developing and moving forward. But you can also start to deliberately form change and bring about awareness for change and push people and set up programs for change in your household, in your community, in your country. And that is the part where I'm saying, what can Malawi learn from Canada? What does Malawi bring to the Commonwealth in general? What do we have that is advantageous that can bring us into the future we want to see? So those are the questions that I came away with, and the questions that are forming the answers and the steps that I'm going to take in the foreseeable future as a young global leader